You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NCF&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today in studio, we have the woman about town, the publisher extraordinaire of your favorite local magazine, Raleigh Magazine, also the owner and creator, by the way, and also she is the chairwoman of the Raleigh Midtown Alliance. Isn't that right?
Hi.
Gina Stephens.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Welcome to the studio. Welcome to Podcast Land. This is not a common occurrence for you. You said you've done a podcast before?
I have. I've done a podcast. I was with on Ashton's podcast.
Yeah, the podcast Raleigh. Yeah.
Well,
all things Raleigh.
Yes.
Yeah, but you do a lot of TV as well, and you're used to having a microphone in your face, and we're going to get into that. But I do want to know, on Ashton's podcast, did they give you coffee when you were there?
They did not.
Okay, well, we, thanks to the good people at Joe Van Gogh, have provided you. It's not a competition, but I do want to highlight how amazing this coffee is by Joe Van Gogh. What are we drinking?
Well, we're drinking Joe Van Gogh. We're drinking specifically the Mountains to the Sea blend. Joe Van Gogh is a relatively new sponsor on our podcast, but let's be honest, Matt and I are huge coffee fans, and we're snobs. You think our wine snobbery is high. Oh, no. It's coffee that is like first and foremost. I have such a hard time drinking average coffee, and I deal with it all day long. Like, I'm always thinking, like, where can I get it? Where can I not get it? How am I going to brew it? How am I not going to brew it? It's a constant thing. So I had that conversation with them while we were getting all this going, and they ended up sending us the Chemex, which is, I got to tell you, first time I tried it, didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
And we didn't get the hot water hot enough. But today,
You nailed it.
A different day. It is delicious. That is, you put the filter in, you grind the coffee, you pour over with the gooseneck kettle, get it real hot. Kyle Sutton told me, maybe get it up to 209 degrees. Okay.
I think that was the key today. You got the gooseneck kettle pro tip up to like 200, and I thought it was 208, but who's counting?
Yeah, shit on my point. But we are drinking the Mountain to Sea blend, which raises money for the Mountains to Sea Trail, mountainstoseatrail.org, that stretches 1,175 miles from the Great Smokies down to the Outer Banks, stopping at many of our state's most beautiful places along the way. Joe Van Gogh launched the blend in 2017 and has released it every summer since then, with notes of candied apple, milk chocolate, lemonade. I wouldn't think that at first, but you know what? I get a little citrus in there. It's a perfect summer adventure coffee. Buy it online at joevangogh.com or at all of their cafes in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill.
It's available now, and we're drinking it now. All right, Gina, back to you. So, why are you here? I'm kidding.
Matt, let me tell you. I go way back with Gina. Way back with Gina. I may or may not have been at least, not the first, but one of the first sponsors, or I bought a page in the Raleigh Magazine while I was the general manager at Midtown Grill up in North Hills, Raleigh. But Gina came in with her swagger. I didn't know her from anybody. And she sat at the bars, hanging out. She's all put together, looks very nice, and she's having a glass of Pinot Grigio, or probably Prosecco, more than not. And she's telling me all about this magazine. But she did preface the fact that this magazine's about to come out. It's Raleigh Magazine. But she's been in this game for a long time. She started Midtown Magazine with her father-in-law.
Yeah.
And worked with your father-in-law for a good while. Ultimately split ways. Essentially signed an NDA, non-compete, for a certain amount of time. And then upon that time ending, boom, Raleigh Magazine. Much bigger region than just Midtown. It's the whole damn city. And you came out with that magazine. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair to say. So when I started Midtown in 2007, the only cranes in the city skyline were in Midtown or at North Hills.
Yeah.
the city wasn't booming. There was no growth going on downtown, or not a lot. And so the timing was perfect. 5 years later, the world's a different place in 2012, and it was easy to look at Raleigh and go, I had lived in Atlanta, I had lived in Phoenix, I had lived in some great cities where there were all these great pockets, and you could start to see that Raleigh was going to have pockets downtown and Five Points and Northwest Raleigh that weren't really going to be covered and really didn't make sense the way Midtown, the magazine, was developing, and it was a good time. I signed a non-compete, and so I took some time and did some consulting work with Our State Magazine, which is a phenomenal publication, and got to watch the monthly engine run, how to put together a monthly magazine, with the full intent of starting Raleigh Magazine.
Yeah.
If you look around the country, we were one of the only metropolitan growing cities that did not have a city publication, and my fear was that some big corporation, some publishing company was going to come into town and try to do it, and I knew that somebody local could do it much better.
No doubt.
Not egistically, I just thought somebody could tell it better than having some outsider try to do it.
Yeah, you'd have your finger more on the pulse.
Yeah, and when I started Midtown, my office was across the street on Six Forks Road. My kids went to St. Timothy's. I mean, I was that live, work, and play, so it was a fit.
Yeah.
But, I had lived all over the country, and city magazines were such a part of my TV background. I think it's the easiest way when you move into a new city, short of you always subscribe to the newspaper and you always subscribe to the city magazine. It'll give you...
And follow the local podcast.
Oh, damn
Subscribe
right.
to the NCF&B podcast,
Yeah.
even if you're moving to Portland.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Who cares?
But it's the way to almost feel like a new, to go from being a newbie to a Raleighite is to immerse yourself in local media and figure it out. And so for me, it was really important. And the food scene is such a big part of why people subscribe to Raleigh Magazine and why they read us and the stories we tell.
Yeah, why did you? Because it seems like that's a huge focus of the magazine, and I mean, we know that Felicia, Max's wife, shoots a lot of the covers, and they're food based or cocktail based. What was going on then that you knew? Because you don't necessarily come from a culinary background, right? You come from a journalistic background.
Right.
So how did you latch on to this is the pulse of the city?
Well, I mean, when I lived in Atlanta, and Atlanta Magazine is one of my favorites, Chicago Magazine, Phoenix Magazine, people are drawn to what brings them together. And food and beverage is what we do. We work. We have to. We take care of our family. We have to. We love to. But what brings us together as a community is food and beverage. It's hospitality. And so we've ensured that almost 14 to 16 pages of a 100-page magazine every month is devoted to food and beverage. And I might be able to share a secret about what's going to be on the June cover before this is over with. So
Yeah, drop a dime
Tell
on
us. This is a couple days before the release. What's going on?
When we launched the magazine, there's some chefs in town who always got a lot of attention, who helped really cultivate the community and shine the bright light nationally on Raleigh. Ashley Christensen's one of them. And
Who's that?
Yeah.
Just kidding.
She didn't, and in some ways, she didn't need us. I mean, you've got Food and Wine, you've got, national publications.
James Beard Awards.
Yeah, she doesn't need little Raleigh Magazine. But, so for the last couple of years, we really haven't done much. But she was gracious enough to invite us to her home and give us the only sneak peek at what the sandwich is going to ultimately look like.
Oh.
So BB's Crispy Chicken.
Yeah, her new chicken sandwich concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's put out some promotional photos, but she's been fine-tuning and fine-tuning and fine-tuning. We sat down with she and Caitlin to talk about their new freezer cookbook.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating about, sort of the family ties to it. And again, there's so many great chefs in this market, but for us, how often does a city have a beard-winning chef that's opening a sandwich shop or a chicken sandwich shop where you can get a $6 sandwich that everybody can try?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a crazy time for her in that, Matt and I were there at James Beard Awards 3 years ago when she was nominated, did not win that year, but had a lot of momentum. And then the next year, boom, took it. And then, of course, then 2020 comes around, and it's like she was kind of at the height of her powers, at least just nationally, everyone knows. But it really has been a punch in the gut for the food and beverage industry in the pandemic. And so, but that's even kind of her book, too, is kind of like thinking, I don't know, maybe like not small, but like thinking more about the home person, because it's always freezer season is the name of her book, where it's all recipes that can be frozen, that you could make now, save for later, par bake or whatever, and use later, which is then totally applicable to pretty much anybody's style of cooking, which I thought was unique. You don't think chefs are going like, yeah, I'm going to make a food book to throw in the freezer, you know?
It is. And I mean, it's got great recipes in there for like the slushy that she and Caitlin served at her wedding.
Yeah.
And it's all kinds of fun stuff. And it's got personal stories about recipes that her mom used to freeze. You know, again, I think we're all kind of taking the pulse on the community and what people are looking for, and that authenticity and that family touch. And I go back to, I think, you know, and this is happening a lot in Atlanta, when you've got, you know, this caliber of chef that, you know, it's a nice restaurant, but you're able to offer up something that everyone can try and everyone can eat. We thought it was worthy of being on our cover, and I'm really excited to be able to show that sandwich off. So
that's pretty cool. So it'll be everywhere. Anyone knows where Raleigh magazines are. By the way, why don't we have Raleigh Magazine here at the kitchen? We need to have a stand.
Done.
Let's get it done.
It'll be done before the magazine drops, so people can find it out front.
I would love that. Or at the very least in the hallway of the Raleigh building or something.
Yeah.
But you know what you're saying, it makes me think, Max and we talk sports a lot and we're huge sports fans, but when you're in a sports bubble, you're only really famous in that bubble, right? Mm-hmm. Unless you get to be the point of like a LeBron James or a Tom Brady, and then you transcend. And that's kind of like being a chef. You know, if you become, you're good in your restaurants, or you're just good in like the uber niche culinary world, but then when you write a book that you can transcend and like helps people and their families at home, that's a whole different level of notoriety and help.
Oh, dude, when I was working for Wolfgang Puck, I loved working there. It was a cool job. I worked for Wolfgang for 5.5 years. But towards the last couple of years of working for him, it wasn't like I was working with Wolfgang Puck. I was working at one of his restaurants on the side.
Really? Because you've always told me, when I worked with Wolfgang, when I like gave him the recipes for his pizza and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, this is after. This is like when we first met, and I showed him how to make the smoked salmon pizza. Yeah. But I mean, I have worked with Wolfgang Puck quite a bit. But towards the end, he released his frozen pizzas and soups. And after a while, I was just like, okay already, Wolfgang. Like, it was everywhere. He was ubiquitous to my life. Like, in every grocery store, in every, like, billboard in L.A. It was just Wolfgang. I'm like, I need to come up for air and not Austrian pizza air. But it is cool. So we can look forward to that. Ashley's got her restaurants opening up soon. I think she's opening, like, 3 or 4, maybe 5.
There's 3 in the Triangle, and the one at Trader Joe's on off of Wake Forest Road will be the first one to open, and you can look for that sort of mid to late June.
Hot news over here. Yeah. See, this is why we get the journalist over here.
That's right.
That's my segue. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about journalism with someone that writes a magazine. For one, and I think I mentioned this to you, just being a cocky asshole when we first met. I was like, you want to get into like the print magazine business? Like, is that even viable? Aren't we just going 100% online and blah, blah, blah? Personally, well, who cares what I have to say? What say you about sticking with a hard copy? You did diversify. I mean, you do have a website and you're quite active on that and social media and all, but what made you feel like, yes, let's still get into the old school print game?
Okay, it's not old school.
Right. It's a medium.
It is. And I'm the same way. I still read books and I hold them. I don't want to sit by the pool or on the beach with my iPad. I like a book. I want to hold it. And I don't believe I'm alone. And what's interesting is magazine subscriptions have increased.
Yeah.
Substantially in the last 2 years, especially during COVID. And I think that, we're inundated. You can't pick up your phone and you're just constantly being, there's messages coming at you, content coming at you, and you're not necessarily picking and choosing. It's not necessarily just local. And I think there is a real drive to connect with local content. People watching local news, reading local magazines. I don't ever, some people could say we're a competitor with the News and Observer. I could care less. I don't want to live in a city that does not have a city newspaper, a daily newspaper. That means your city's thriving. That means we're happening. We've got interesting stuff going on, interesting people coming to town. You have to support your local media. You want those stories told.
Yeah. I also think there's a cool thing or something that I remember when I first moved here, or maybe I'd been like 6 months, whatever, and you were on the cover of something like Working Dads or something like that. I remember.
I was on the cover
of Raleigh Magazine.
As a dad.
Yeah, as a dad.
It was,
and we had just started the podcaster, so it said like podcaster dad or something like that. But there was a cool thing. I was walking down Fayetteville and I was like, oh, there's Max on the cover of Raleigh Mag. I was like, that's cool. And you can see that. And like, it's not a billboard. It's a magazine that you can pick up and read and then see what's going on. So
I will say this, too, to that same point. So Gina collected, it was like 6 dads from all different walks of life. And it was talking about like the new dad, the modern dad, which is not the old school, go to work, 80 hours a week, not see their children, come back with a 3-finger highball of scotch and then just like yell at all the kids. I mean, it's 2 fingers and it's tequila.
Or gin.
But no, it was cool. And what's funny is I had just left the restaurant industry, technically. I had left being a full-time restaurant employee. And there was another gentleman there that was representing like the restaurant side of it. Like he was the restaurant manager. And I looked at him like, I'm that guy. Wait, why are there both of us here? And then I think Gina was like, hey, you're the podcaster.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? And at that same time, like even local fantastic PR person, Jen Noble Kelly, said to me one time, she's like, you do know you're part of the media now, right?
Yeah.
And I went, huh? She's like, you're not in the food and beverage industry anymore. Now that you do this thing that's public and you're interviewing people, you're media. And then when Gina wrote my name on the cover that said Max Trujillo, podcaster, I'm like, oh shit. Like, okay. And I actually kind of took it more seriously after that moment, which was cool. It's like, there's something so powerful about the written word, right?
I think so, and we kind of did this reverse. When I built Midtown, I built it totally differently than I built Raleigh Magazine. I am a journalist. I'm a journalist. I went to journalism school at the University of Georgia, and I'm a very proud dog fan.
Yeah,
and
Matt Stafford, is he going to do anything this year in LA?
I don't know. Maybe.
Probably not.
Probably not.
I don't know. I heard he's like a 14-1 to win MVP. So you put your money down.
14-1. It's kind of like horse racing.
Yeah.
Derek Carr, 13-1.
But, I believe that if you tell good stories, and it's sort of like the podcast, if you tell good stories consistently, people will read and people will listen and they'll pay attention and the advertising will come. And that's what we've prided ourselves on. That story we did with you guys was one of my favorite stories because it was dads who may have started out on this path but changed it because they realized they wanted to be part of their kids' lives and they wanted to be a different dad than maybe the dad they had or the dads they knew. And so it's, for me, it's all about telling a good story.
So what do you mean by saying that you built it differently? Are you saying with like Midtown that you built it for sponsors first?
I think so. I think we concentrated more on advertising and more on that end of it, which, hey, it pays the bills. But I believed that people would pay for a magazine if it was good content. And they do. I mean, we will be 6 years old, which sounds like a baby, but 6 years is a long time in the publishing industry. We'll be 6 in September, and we have over 20,000 paid subscribers. I mean, that's paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to mention like all the distribution of the magazines that are just everywhere around the city.
I mean, we have over 90,000 readers a month, but building paid subscribers is virtually impossible these days because most people are willing to give away their content. And we do. We put it on the street. We want people to have it. But we also know that people will pay. I mean, it ends up being like, 93 cents an issue.
I was going to say, it's not terribly expensive, but it's
$10 for 10 issues.
Right. So you're just getting the thing is, you want that Raleigh magazine. Well, now it comes to your house. You don't have to go and steal a bunch of them from the kitchen's front door or whatever. But
well, I think I really appreciate you saying that, because I remember when Max and I started this, and it was just like something for us to do creatively and to highlight people. And I was thinking, I don't think we even thought about, people always ask you, well, what's your intention? Do you guys make any money on that? And then after a couple of years, and we saw how impactful it was, and then we got a studio and we got to pay bills on the studio. And then other thing, we're like, okay, well, we should probably take this seriously, take ourselves seriously, and make some money on it. But
we had sponsors prior to coming to the studio.
Yes, because
but also
because I think both of us got tired of people asking us like, "Oh, do you guys make any money out of us?" And just being like, "Well,
remember, obviously Felicia Food Scene was our sponsor, but it was more like sponsor in kind because she was like doing all of our social media for us, which was great. But Curate, I think, was our first actual sponsor.
Steve Mangano.
Because Steve Mangano, who has his business head together, and he was like a guest on the show, at the end was like, maybe we could work together here. And then we both looked at each other like, oh, somebody wants to give us money for this?
Yeah.
I don't know, $4? What is it? $8?
How much do you have in your wallet?
Yeah. But it was, but we kind of like Steve helped us realize the importance of what we had. And then we realized, and then listeners started coming in a lot higher than when we realized, oh shit, there's a lot of people listening to this. Now I think it was easier for us to to ask for money for sponsorship.
Because we're having good content and we're telling stories. And I do want to ask you about that, because you are like a hardcore journalist, let's say. You're educated in this. I'm not really a journalist. I did take a journalism class and I'm educated, but Max neither. But we feel comfortable speaking. We feel comfortable dealing with issues. But I do want to get onto the sort of controversial side of media, because for us to think of media, our intent in starting this podcast was to highlight people and really give people who weren't in the food and beverage industry a look behind the scenes, and give people who were in the industry a voice to tell these stories. But you're trying to highlight people also, but then there's some stuff where bad things happen in the restaurant, and especially with the Me Too movement, with what's happened with Beta Monda over the last year and a half.
We've taken a beating on some choices that I've made. I don't mind admitting we had covered that story repeatedly and felt like we had really done an adequate job. We interviewed I don't like the word victims, but people who had been part of that and had spoken out. We felt like we'd really told that story. And a year later or so, when the restaurant shifted and brought in outside management to run it and was trying to keep these notable restaurants open with no family involvement, I told that story.
Yeah.
And I took a bloodbath for it. I will tell you that I have probably the thickest skin of anybody you'll ever meet. And I think it's from loving sports and playing sports and all of that as a kid. But I have thick skin. But when you get attacked, it's personal, and especially when it's your baby. I have 4 kids. This is like kid number 5.
Yeah.
And it was personal. It was, but I understood the raw feelings. But I think, we're not ever going to be the indie, if you will. I love the indie. My past editors, they are now and running the show, and they're fabulous at what they do. That's not who we are, but I'm not going to shy away from a story that I think needs to be told. If we're not, I don't want anybody to ever look at it and go, oh, well, they just write about all the openings and the fluff stuff. They don't ever touch on anything, the real story. And, we're working on a story right now about the shortage of workers in the hospitality industry and how devastating that is, and what it's devastating on both sides. The workers need and want, more stability in their lives, but restaurateurs can't open. If they don't have people working, and that is a real challenge in a city that's got Apple coming and Google, and we have to figure that out.
Do you think, in retrospect, to be honest, I think I read the article a long time ago and I don't really remember, but do you think that it was written with with any bias?
No, I can honestly tell you there was absolutely no bias in telling that story. I felt like that restaurant, and it could have been any restaurant in town, had tried to take responsibility, and they were trying to move forward in keeping these restaurants open. What I realized is that we probably could have handled it differently. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. And I learned a lot from that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is I wouldn't go back and undo it.
Okay.
I would not tell that story, because I think in fairness to the community, it's a story that needed to be told, and there are a lot of people who weren't necessarily touched by it, who still cared about those restaurants and the food and the people that worked there.
I was in that article.
You were.
You asked a few restaurant people to speak, Andrew Ullum, Sean Degnan, and myself, of which I did see a good Reddit comment that was like, cool, 3 white males, let's have them talk about social issues, sexual issues inside the restaurant industry, especially given the time and the political moment at the time. So I get it, and I got beat up a lot too, because, hey, I've been in this restaurant industry for a long time, and you and I worked together for a long time, Matt, in these industries, and we both knew how effed up the restaurant industry was, and we are not totally free of sin. We have all said, like, shady things. We've commented on women, and we've said lousy things at times, and locker room talk, whatever you want to say. It's happened. It's not to say that we are all free of sin. No. It's that now that we've been exposed to understanding the way the culture was, and understanding that this is not how it's supposed to be, this is not the way it's going to be, and so can we tread a new path and be cool with it? I think what got really tumultuous was that, like, maybe it looked like it wasn't, it didn't seem like anyone said they were sorry over in that camp. And that was like the biggest thing. It was like, come and eat more of our food.
Right.
Yeah. Keep us in business. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and we got crucified because people thought that we had somehow taken money for the story, or that we had taken advertising. No, I mean, there wasn't. It was just telling a story. And when Sarah came forward and talked to us, I mean, she told her story and we covered that. I mean, it was a lot for someone personal to tell what they had been through. And I felt, I was proud that she was willing to share her story with us in the pages of our magazine. And by no means did I mean to make her or anyone else that was involved feel less than, or that I didn't respect what they had been through by telling the next part of that story. Would never do that. I just would never do that. I really take it personally. And to say I learned something from this experience, again, I wouldn't go back and not do it just because we took a beating. I might have done it a little differently.
Sure.
But that's the only thing I can say.
But you're a journalist, and you're putting things in print, which live forever.
Ever.
And you don't get to redact something that has literally physically been printed,
And I take that super seriously. I mean,
right.
It's a reflection of my staff and the company, but the reality is my name is on that magazine, and I own it. And I never want to feel like I have done an injustice to anyone. Our job is to tell the story and not to have any bias in favor of a restaurant or in favor of a person. It's about telling a story.
I just maybe you can shed some light on this, because I think the whole term of journalistic integrity or journalism today is in a super gray area, because I'm sure when you were coming up, there was a clearly defined line of being a journalist. Yes. You remove yourself from the story, you remove your opinion, and you tell the story based on facts. Nowadays, it's almost like you have to have an opinion. The greatest publications, or thought of the greatest publications in the world, for journalists now are asked to have an opinion. The New York Times, or the Washington Post. They are left-leaning papers, and people like that or they don't. And so, if you want to be a journalist, and also, so many stories are caught by and sources from other people who may or may not be reputable. So where do you find the truth these days?
It's hard. I mean, you're right. I mean, I came through journalism school at a totally different time. I mean, there was a clear separation of church and state between sales and editorial. There was you weren't really supposed to have a feeling, and you were supposed to be able to write a story without anybody ever really knowing what you thought about it. And I really...
That's what editorials are for, right?
Yeah, if you want to have an opinion, find an opinion piece.
Yeah.
Write a letter to the editor at the newspaper, and they'll publish it.
Right.
And I have a letter from the publisher, and sometimes I'll take an opinion on something, or I'll support a candidate, or support a bond with the city. That's me personally supporting it and being willing to go out on a limb, not the magazine. It's hard, and it's sad. I had this discussion Sunday night with someone about you almost have to pick and choose the newspaper you read based on what your political affiliation is, or you pick,
Which is
or you.
insane.
It is
Yeah.
crazy, and I don't understand how we fix that.
Well, I think one of the problems I see is that back in the day when you were a journalist, you're coming up, you're talking about the LA Times, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune. These were businesses that were cemented in the culture. They weren't going anywhere, and they were vehicles to provide the truth. That was their whole point. But as technology has changed, and as the medium of the media has changed, any of these places could just go away because something cooler and newer, and like Reddit now exists, and now just an online rag mag exists. So like the people that run these notable businesses are like, oh shit, we got to make sure we got enough money to keep the lights on. Right. So hey, journalist, I know you want to crack the story open on this thing, but that's gonna piss off our sponsor.
Yeah.
Right.
And so we gotta make sure that this works. And so the journalists never had to be harried by that moment ever before.
They weren't even in the same building in most cases.
Right.
Sales was in another building. Along the same line, something that has been fascinating to me is that how many people get their actual news from us in terms of our Instagram.
When you say us, are you saying the media, or you're saying Raleigh Magazine?
Raleigh Magazine.
Okay.
My Instagram. Not from my magazine, from my Instagram. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times the governor would speak, and 20 minutes later, we would make a post about what was changing with restrictions, or a business coming to town, and we've got 1,500 people or whatever the number is liking it and commenting. Wow, I didn't know that, and you start to realize where people are getting their news from is entirely different than when we were growing up, or even maybe where the three of us get our news from. It's generationally, it's very different.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, where do you get your news?
Well,
Raleigh Magazine.
Sarah Weiss.
Who's brilliant, by the way.
Yeah.
He's a lucky man.
No, but this is a great point, because I've been struggling with this week, especially as a Jewish person, and with all the things going on with racial ties and Israel. Obviously, there's talks of a lot of anti-Semitism, and there's all this, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking, okay, is this the point where I really need to be an activist and take a stand? And I mean, the answer to that is yes, regardless, because I'm a proudly Jewish person. But is this really a thing that's affecting Jews across the world right now? Or is it just affecting, because we're in such a high level of racial sensitivity that every race is coming up next? We had Black Lives Matter, and then there was an Asian backlash, and now it's the Jews' turn. Is that what's going on?
The sad part is all of those that you said are all still happening.
Right.
It's not we're not on to the next. We're just adding another thing onto the pile.
Yeah, but is it a thing, or I'll call it are Jews just be like, oh well, we need our we're a persecuted people, and we're less than 0.1% of the world's population, but so do we need to be recognized now, and we need to have some sensitivity now?
I think I could safely say that. Yes, the Jews have always been persecuted and been treated unjustly throughout thousands of years.
Right.
And you guys have always
so now it's the time to see
But that's the thing, is that society can learn a lot from the Jews, by the way, because downtrodden as a whole, but man, work fucking hard as hell to provide for their family and education and keep it going, and not look back. Nope, we got to keep going, got to keep pushing.
Yeah.
So
But Matt,
there's a lot of love there.
I think that people need to take a responsibility to share factual information.
Right.
And I think, someone educated and Jewish, you should share. Those voices need to be heard. And I think that's constructively.
But here's the other thing. I guess it's, you asked me where I get my news from, and there's not like one source, right? It's random things. And sometimes it is on Instagram, but then it's like, well, this is one person's piece who shared somebody else's personal story. You don't know where that's coming from. You don't know if it's true. You don't know how, if it's right, that own person's reality. So it is the world of media, the world of journalism is so confusing. And I'm only bringing the whole anti-Semite and Judaism into it because it's like, that's how personally confusing it is for me. So I can't imagine how it is for others now.
I'll tell you, I started my career, I came out of journalism school and I went to work for NBC and then ABC and moved around the country. And so I worked in television as a news producer and special projects producer. And I have in this market, I can't even tell you, there's been 10 or 12 that have announced retirements, and not retiring, but leaving the industry. Amanda Lamb posted the other day, who's one of my favorite people and is a reporter at WRAL. She was spit on. She was spit on telling a story. And the only thing I'd say is I get that we're the media and we tell stories, and it's often the media gets, black labeled or whatever you want to call it. But the reality is there is respect for what we do. And I really do believe that locally our television stations and our newspaper and our magazines, for the most part, are really trying to tell good stories and trying to be honest and factual. And there's been a real backlash and a lack of respect for people in the media, especially in television.
Well, I think that it's real easy to attribute that, like, over the last 4 years, like our previous term, our president made it a point to take down anything that was considered trustworthy or whatever, because it doesn't help his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn or even or cited on this. I think it was like direct shots fired towards the media to just take down their truth. But then at the same time, you also have a bunch of other media forms that are doing whatever they can to just get their foot in the door, the ankle biters that then rise to the top because their message that they said is so insane but aligns with what someone wants to believe, that boom, they shoot to the top. Now we have to consider them. We have to consider that maybe they're credible. And so then, now we're left with nothing. We're not left with any substance. Felicia and I will have a conversation about a topic in that's happening in the world, and she'll just tell me like the beats, or I'll tell her the beats, and we'll both get a completely different point of view of this. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what they're trying to do there, right? And she's like, huh? I'm like, this is clearly a money grab that they're doing this to do that. And she's like, I don't think so at all. I think it's because societally it makes more sense to do this. I'm like, see, like, how can we read a topic and also be husband and wife for 20 years that
who
know
both
each other,
see the world in similar values,
but like read into it completely different. Now, granted, I read into things all the time, so
that's true.
It's usually my fault, but I'm a lot of times right, which keeps me going. That's the main thing. If I'm wrong, I'll say, oh yeah, that was stupid. Which I do that.
Maybe.
I do that. But yeah, it's tough. And like I'll listen to Adam Carolla all the time. He's a daily podcast. And so I know that he's kind of somewhat right-leaning, and I'm as firmly in the middle as possible, I would say, especially as time has been going on. But I'll just listen. They'll do topical stuff on the show, and I try to just weed through all the nonsense. Sometimes he says something that's funny, a funny lilt to it, which is why I listen. But most of the time, it's like, okay, this is just a story that's happening. Now I have to like ingest it in my brain and think about what does that mean, and how do I feel about it? And I hope more people are doing that. Like, not just letting another person tell you what to think.
The whole thing you talked about before with our former president, it was a divide and conquer tactic, so that if he divides and creates divisiveness, his agenda rises because he's seen as the sane one and the voice of reason, and that is no way to be. I can tell you that, and I'll just say that I personally will truthfully tell you I lean left, but I am always about the best person for the job, and when that comes politically, and I just wish more people could see that, because that's the important thing. Yeah. But
unfortunately, most people are just trying to get elected, not try to lead. That's the main thing. That's
the problem. But I do, before we get too far away from food and beverage, I do want to talk to you about something that is 100% truthful, and that is Bubbles and Brisket.
Can't wait.
Oh my God! Yes,
Yes.
Bubbles
Cannot
and
wait.
Brisket. This is
Where we can all come together and enjoy two things that most of us love.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the 17% coverage that the Raleigh Magazine uses on food and beverage is proof that this is the it's a even playing field. It's how we all come together. It's about eating and drinking and hanging out, where we don't have to worry about the politics of life or whatever. We can all just enjoy. And this is also the first time that Raleigh Magazine and the NCF&B have officially come together on an event. So, well, I mean,
we're super excited. So our October, gosh, you can tell which one I'm thinking about. Our last issue, we featured the barbecue sandwich. And we did a mixture of long-standing Cooper's Barbecue and the Pit, but mixed it up with the new guys in town and the ones that are coming. And
that photo shoot was at my house.
It was.
And every single barbecue purveyor's food was there.
Yes.
So,
Gee, I didn't get a call that day.
there was enough food there to feed half of Raleigh. But the food was amazing. The people are amazing. There is really there's something. I grew up in North Carolina, so went to many a pig picking, if you will, and there's something about barbecue that just brings people together. Everybody's sitting at the same table. There's community, and again, you pour bubbles, I'll be anywhere bubbles are.
Right.
yeah, so the idea of Bubbles and Brisket, it's on Saturday, June 26th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at V Pizza. That's in Cary. Our good friend Anthony Rapillo is the owner of V Pizza, and he is going to provide a brisket-based pizza, which is going to be delicious. But we have fantastic contributors like Kyle Sutton, who's in the other room right now, from Bestow Baked Goods, and Butts for Babies, a great little charity he's working with. We have Longleaf Swine. We have Boricua Soul. We have Carrie Schleifer of Alley 26th and Crook's Corner. We're going to have James Johnson, who was the guy that kind of made us put our mouth where we're not enough money, whatever.
Yeah.
He just said, "Do it, boys."
Yeah.
James Johnson, a longtime listener of the show and great chef, he's at Skipper's. He's coming down with his brisket. We're collecting a ton of food people together to make their version of brisket. And Matt, because he's a wine guy working for a wine bow, his day job, was able to kind of connect us to a lot of fantastic suppliers. Talk to us a little bit about some of the sparkling that's going to be there.
Yeah, so Max Cast, who's the master sommelier, the good Max, who was the wine director and I think I said master sommelier at the Farrington House, now works for Broadbent Selection. So he's bringing a bunch of his bubbles, some from Austria and actually some from England, which are right over the Dover Cliffs and made in Method Champenois. And so very similar terroir to Champagne.
English sparking is awesome.
And it's fantastic. And then we'll have Wine Cellars there, which has some Argentinian bubbles, some beautiful Prosecco, and also a great Champagne Bezerat de Bellafon. And then Deborah Lewis, who won't be able to be there, but she's sending in her goods. They have some of the best grower champagne in this country when you talk about the likes of Edmond Barneau and Jean-Marc Selec and Pierre Moncuy. So it is going to be quite tasty.
Yeah, and newly added to the whole thing, Bestow Baked Goods is going to provide sweets for everyone. So some cupcakes, maybe some cookies, some delicious things. And then we're having live entertainment. The fantastic George Hodge, which a lot of people know him from the comic book world and the art world. If you saw J. Cole's Dreamville event, he wrote out Dreamville in this like beautiful comic book lettering, and those words were rerun, and they say Raleigh above the Locals Oyster Bar in Transferco. That's all George Hodge's artwork. It's also right above me, right behind me. But he is a fantastic singer and guitar player, musician, and he's going to be performing. Also, Tom Anderson, who many people in the local area might not know. He's relatively new from here, but he's coming up from your neck of the woods, Matt, and a fantastic songwriter. So 2 different musicians performing, desserts, bubbles, brisket. Matt and I will also be conducting interviews with all of the chefs as we're kind of going through the whole thing. Brisket provided by Butcher's Market.
Yes.
And Gina did a lovely full-page ad in the Raleigh Magazine, and we're all working together.
And thanks to Triangle Wine Company for also helping provide the wine, too. So that works.
So get our tickets at our website, ncfbpodcast.com/events, or click the link in all of the show notes that we have here or any of our social media endeavors. You can also get that on the Raleigh Magazine Instagram. So join us. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll also say, if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, things are going to fill up, and so there's limited space available because the parking lot's only that big. So go ahead and get your tickets.
Yeah. All right. Now
be fun.
I want to dive back a little deeper into the beginning life of one Miss Stephens. When you were a journalist, I heard about like sting operations.
Sarah Weiss. I know where this came from. So I started, my second job right out of college was at WXIA in Atlanta. I was a baby, like 24 years old, and willing to do and try anything. I was looking for a way to make my name, and there was an investigative unit. And so while I was there, we did 2 investigations, and I was sort of the bait, if you will. The first one, there was this may still exist, so I hope I'm not going to get in trouble for telling it, but there was a hotel in DeKalb County that once a month rented out the ballroom and the 2 upper floors for a swingers club.
Yeah, baby!
I'm serious about this, okay? I'm 24 years old. I have lived a very sheltered life at that point. That is not something I know much about. So on a Saturday afternoon.
When you heard swingers, were you thinking, oh, this is like the music?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is going to be great. I'm going to dance and have a little fun.
So
my poodle skirt.
Yeah, my producer and I partner up, and he's going to pretend to be my husband, and he's only about 20 years older than I am. And I've got this god-awful, ugly purse that looks like something your great-grandmother wouldn't carry that is wired with a camera in it.
Whoa.
And we go on Saturday afternoon of Halloween weekend to the first-time joiners club so that we can learn all the tits and tails, if you will, of joining the swingers club.
Oh, my God. Okay, so what did you see?
Well, it's a room. It looks like you're going to orientation to buy a condo. I mean, or a timeshare. Seriously, it's in a room. And
it wasn't like Eyes Wide Shut? That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Nope, not at all. Not this group. Except the only thing different is at the end of the time, they just walk around with condoms.
Oh,
Lots
that's
of
nice.
them. Well, keep in mind, this was like 1990. I'm going to show how old I am, like 93, 90, something like that, 94. And so,
the height of AIDS.
Yeah. Especially in Atlanta. Yeah. And so I am literally having to pick my jaw up off the floor, and he keeps nudging me like, quit looking so doe-eyed.
Keep it together.
I mean, I was just, so we go to that. They invite us back that night for a costume party. And
that's where you get the Eyes Wide Shut stuff.
Yeah. She's been a member ever since.
Nope. Nope. Didn't take my card. Didn't sign up. But I will tell you that I have never in my life, before that or after that, seen anything quite like it. Everybody's got a lifestyle, and, more power to them. But it was something else.
But was it just the one day, and did you write a story about it?
Oh, yeah. We did a whole series that aired on the news about the club and how it worked. And I will give them credit. I mean, the leaders of it really spent a lot of time talking about
very organized events.
The integrity of marriage, and and how important it was, and condom use, and all of that. But yeah,
these guys are helping us put Bubbles and Brisket together. Really top notch.
Actually, after we're using the parking lot for
oh my God.
And I'll tell you, the
retreat.
The other one never made air. The other series. I went undercover as I guess I looked so young, as a teenage sort of runaway, applying for jobs in massage parlors or underage jobs. So the city gave me a fake ID to use, and I will tell you that's the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wired up, and we went in one place, vans on the street. It's just like you see on TV. I mean, no kidding, vans on the street.
But you have news vans, but you don't police. Do police know you're going in there?
No.
Okay.
And this was one where it's what I didn't realize was you don't know. I opened the door. I supposedly have an interview. I open the door, and then you go down 3 levels to the basement.
Oh,
well, the microphone doesn't work.
Oh, no.
And there's all this black leather and harnesses from the ceiling all over the place.
So it was like a real, sex dungeon.
Yeah. Had no idea what I'd been set up for. Terrified.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a baby.
Wait, you didn't even know what the job was for?
I knew I was applying for a massage therapist job.
Okay, right.
But you didn't realize
wink, wink, nod, nod.
Yeah. And
but,
you just happen to have to wear a lot of vinyl and black stuff, but that's okay.
And yeah, I mean, that was that. I mean, I can't say it is now. I haven't lived in Atlanta a long time, but that was a huge problem for teenage girls and runaways. And so we were really trying to highlight the dangers and the seriousness of what was happening to these young women. It never made air. It was. It honestly, that was the scariest part. It got to a point where they felt like my safety was in jeopardy in some of the places I was going. And so we pulled the series. But it was everything from massage parlors to the dungeon, if you will, to some guy's house. So it was kind of crazy. These ads were running in the Atlanta Journal. So but
That's wild.
I learned a lot.
I bet.
Yeah.
Grew up a lot.
Yeah. I don't know where we go from there. I mean, I think that's pretty much like. Is there any?
You need some proof alcohol ice cream now? I know I need 5 scoops right now.
Is there any Raleigh Magazine articles that have gotten controversial or undercover ever?
No, I'm not to say we wouldn't. I think we talk about all the time that there are lots of topics that we could do investigations on, and I think we will. We were. Really, 2020 just sucked. I mean, there's just no way around it for all of us. We had just held our biggest event at King's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know you were there. It was our Best Bars event. We packed it in. I think we exceeded Paul and Chidi's capacity. It was an incredible night.
Yeah.
And we were coming off all of that when the world sort of fell apart. And so, I'll be honest, I'm pretty proud of my staff and what we did. We held on. A lot of publications shuttered, stopped printing. So I think, we're still here and we've published the entire time. And I think we'll grow our staff. We're already growing and coming up, and we'll do some investigations, but nothing quite like that. But luckily, Raleigh doesn't. I'm not going to say they don't have that, but we don't have that problem.
I have to at least mention, you've had me write on Raleigh Magazine for now probably
2 years.
3 years? At least. It might be, I think, 3 years as the restaurant guru, which I didn't make that name
That's
up.
you?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, everybody now knows. My face is on there, by the way. But thank you, by the way, for having me do this. I didn't consider myself a writer or anything.
Yeah.
It was just somebody that, knows the business or whatever. And then literally from interviewing 100,000 people now, but we've interviewed at least 300 people on this show, minimum, that it has given me a lot of perspective. And so for those that don't know, I've been doing this article almost every month for the last few years in Raleigh Magazine, where it's like Dear Abby. Somebody will come up with a question why do restaurants, how come restaurants don't seat me immediately, or what do they feel about with my dog coming to dine or whatever. Most of the time they're pretty just oh, I didn't know that, or oh, that's good to know, or whatever it might be. But I crack up because I had the controversial. It wasn't controversial in a sex crime or racial thing. No, it was that the issue that happened right before the pandemic. Why don't servers not write down the order? Because all you can do is fail, and in the end, it's not that impressive for when servers can remember 4 courses between an 8 top. It's if you just wrote it down, it'd be the same result. Everything would be perfect. So no one cares that you memorized it. They do care, however, when you F it up, and then now I don't have my meal and everybody else is eating. So the last line I wrote in that whole thing was, when your server fails to write down the order and then messes up the delivery of the food service, maybe you forget to leave a tip on the tip line. Maybe that will help teach that person to do it right. And that sounds really shitty of me to say. And then immediately after the release of that magazine and that article, the entire restaurant industry shut down, and everyone was laid off. And now I'm telling the community, don't tip these assholes. And that was great. I got a lot of flack for that one. I had to dodge a few bullets from that one. And I'm look, everybody, if you're a lousy server, are you defending yourself? But I suck. I should still get tips.
But you know what's even crazy about that is, now, what are we, 14, 15 months later, that whole issue is becoming, it won't be an issue probably 15 months, 3 years, because everyone's going to be ordering digitally with all the technology. I mean, just like at Y Hill and a lot of other places have gone to that.
Yeah.
And
you're not memorizing.
You're not memorizing anything. As a matter of fact, you're not even going to be taking orders, especially with the way the service industry is going, because it's going to be.
But you can still also tip or not tip people, and that.
Well, yes, that's true. Unless, but the conversation of actually messing it up. But
it's and I don't know where you stand on that, and certainly for somebody who's not in the hospitality industry. And I waitress my way through college, and it's some really bad restaurants. But I lived off of it, and it's the hardest, most honest day's work you will ever do. But I don't want, I really don't want it to go to all computerized. Mm-hmm. And, I think part of why you go out to a restaurant, I am that person. I will, and there's probably people who listen to this will roll their eyes and go, yep, she's asked me. I don't sit down at a table at any restaurant. Even if I've been there 30 times, I'll ask the new waitress that I've never met, I'll say, what's your favorite thing on the menu? What are you drinking these days?
Yeah.
Because I look at it and go, they're in the industry.
Yeah.
They know more than, and I want a recommendation. I don't want to go to not having that personal touch. For me, dining out it's so much more than the food. I love the food, but if you ask me about, I'm going to pick a place based on the experience and probably the cocktail.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap it in a bow, I think like that mentality is also kind of the mentality of why print magazine, this tactile thing still exists, why it still is relevant, is that now we're at a place where technology has given us the ability to have whatever we want, and what we choose to have are things like a conversation or a magazine to read, or to hand it over to a friend or whatever, or just do it all digitally. But the best part is one did not destroy the other.
Right.
It just allowed us to have more options and then get what we want, which is why you can read Raleigh Magazine on RaleighMagazine.com, or you can get it delivered to your house, or you can pick it up at little places all around the city, because it's now just made life more accustomed to your wants and needs, which I think is kind of cool.
I have one more question for both of you to put a fly in that ointment. What if that server, who you were telling you're sitting at a four-top or whatever, telling your order to, took out their phone to write your order down in their notes section or something like that?
I mean, unless they're playing Candy Crush in the middle.
Unless they're texting their boyfriend, I don't care.
Yeah, they're like, here, let me pull my phone out to take your. Oh my God, Jessica just broke up with Matt. Guys, I'll be right back. I gotta, yeah. So,
your chicken order can wait.
Yeah. Well, Gina, thank you. We've known each other for so long. You've been such a close personal friend of both the podcast, the kitchen, food scene, MRC, everywhere around, and just the local restaurant and food and beverage industry. You are a huge champion for what we all do, and it was great to just actually have you on the show. You've been behind the scenes for a long time, so we appreciate you coming here. The way we say thank you is to give you a pint of proof alcohol ice cream. We don't have a Prosecco version of it yet, though that would be really great. You could make maybe like a float, little bubbles.
Oh, totally.
Throw a little Prosecco on top. I kid, because that's Gina's drink of choice, typically, as a person that has served her a beverage once or twice. I know. But before you leave, you can go out and select whatever flavor you will want. Like it could be a coconut rum, it could be a bourbon caramel, it could be a strawberry moonshine. There are many different flavors. They are 7% ABV in every pint. You can get them anywhere, like the aforementioned Triangle Wine Company. That's where we'd go. But if you don't have one in your area, you can also go to Total Wine. You can go to Harris Teeter. You can go to Lowe's. Not the home building place, but the place where they sell
Lowe's Foods.
Yeah, Lowe's Foods. You can get anywhere. They're now in 7 states, if not even more by this point. They're fantastic. It's a really great way to think differently about dessert. Go to proofalcoholicecream.com or check the links in our show notes. Matt, what else you got?
Gina, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Really looking forward to partnering with you on Bubbles and Brisket. Go to Raleigh Magazine and you will find out where to eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.